Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD Bodybuilder, back with another video. Today I'm going to be giving you a full push-pull split. The push-pull split is one of the most requested splits I've been asked to cover, and it's one that I've used myself in the past. This split divides up your muscle groups into two different days, your push and your pull day, also commonly known as anterior and posterior, or front and back. On the push day, you'll be training your push muscles, which will include your chest, triceps, delts, and also your quads. On your pull day, you'll be training your back, biceps, glutes, and hamstrings. Quick outline for today, I'm going to be giving you a full science-based hypertrophy program based on the push-pull split. This program is set for 4 days per week and will be well designed for a beginner or early intermediate athlete. We'll start off with a program walkthrough where I share the entire program and walk you through step by step how I wrote it. Then we'll go into implementation throughout the week. We'll talk about the pros and cons of the push-pull split in general. And lastly, we'll go over recommendations for modifications that you might want to make as you progress. If you've been getting value from my channel, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. All right, guys, let's do our program walkthrough. So here's an overview of the program. You've got your 4 days, push 1, push 2, and pull 2. These are the exercises, and then you've got your sets and reps here. And at the bottom, I've listed number of sets per workout, so you have an idea of your workout lengths. And down here, I've got your muscle groups and your weekly volumes. I think it's really important to get used to counting your weekly set volumes, because this will help you guide your volume adjustments for different muscle groups to find the individual muscle group ideal volumes. So starting off with our first push day, which basically trains the anterior muscles. We start off with squats, 3 sets of 5 to 8 for the quads, and then leg press, 3 sets of 6 to 10, also for the quads. Then we've got bench press for the chest, 3 sets of 5 to 8, and then overhead press, 2 sets of 5 to 8. Then we move on to a bit of tricep work, skull crushers, 3 sets of 8 to 12. And then we've got cable lateral raises for the side delts, 3 sets of 8 to 10. Lastly, we finish off with some abs and calves. Hanging leg raises for the abs, 3 sets of 8 to 12. And standing dumbbell calf raises, 3 sets of 8 to 12. Next, we'll move on to pull day 1, which trains the posterior muscle groups. We started with deadlifts for the hamstrings and glutes, 3 sets of 5 to 8. And then we've got lunges, which I also count for glutes and hamstrings, 3 sets of 6 to 10. Lunges also do give you a lot of quad stimulation, so it's a nice way to fit in some more quad work. Then we move on to some back training. So weighted chin-ups, 3 sets of 6 to 10. And single arm dumbbell rows, 3 sets of 8 to 12. Then we train our biceps. We've got hammer curls, 2 sets of 6 to 10, and easy bar curls, 3 sets of 8 to 12. Lastly, we finish off with upright rows, which you could count for a pull. I count them for side delts, but it's a nice way to sneak in some more side delt training. You'll see that I like to start off my workouts with the heaviest, most difficult lift first, because you will have the most amount of energy at this point and you'll be able to dedicate all of your focus and get the most out of it. You'll also see that the heavy free weight movements lend themselves to lower rep ranges, and more machine or isolation type movements will do better with higher rep ranges. Moving on to our second push day. We start off with quad work, so front squats, 3 sets of 6 to 10, and leg extensions, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Then we've got incline dumbbell bench press for the chest, 3 sets of 6 to 10, and close grip bench press, which I count for both chest and triceps, 3 sets of 6 to 10. I like putting my close grip bench press on a separate day from bench because you'll be more fresh and you'll perform better on it, and it'll give you that extra boost of technique work on pressing. Then we've got cable press downs for the triceps, 2 sets of 10 to 15. Moving on, cable lateral raises for the side delts, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Then we've got weighted crunches for the abs, 3 sets of 10 to 15. I like to choose ab movements that allow progressive overload, specifically through adding weight. Lastly, we have some calf work, machine calf raises, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Abs and calves will work nicely for supersets. Lastly, we've got our second pull day. Starting off, we've got Romanian deadlifts for the glutes and hamstrings, 3 sets of 6 to 10. And then leg curls for the hamstrings, 3 sets of 10 to 15. You'll see that I put my toughest leg movements, squat and deadlift, on our first push and pull days, because these days are separated by a rest day in between. Our second push and pull days are going to be back to back at the end of the week, so you really want to be careful about choosing your movements here. Front squats are going to be more quad dominant, and RDLs are going to be more pure of a hip hinge rather than deadlifts, especially if you're doing sumo deadlifts. So having them back to back means they'll interfere with each other less. Namely, if you go into RDLs with sore quads from the day before, you're probably still going to be okay. But if you had to do, say, sumo deadlifts, it might be a lot harder. You'll also see that I put my isolation leg work on these second days because they're going to be less taxing and easier to put back to back. Now for some back training, we've got barbell rows, 3 sets of 8 to 12, and then lat pull downs, 3 sets of 10 to 15. Then we have preacher curls for the biceps, 3 sets of 8 to 12. Then you've got Bayesian curls for the biceps, which are basically a standing curl where you're facing away from the cable and you have your arm behind your body, 2 sets of 10 to 15. And then upright rows for the side delts, 3 sets of 10 to 15. You'll see that on the first 2 days, I have a bit more bias towards heavier weights and lower reps. And on the second 2 days, I have more high rep training. This is how I like to integrate daily undulating periodization, or DUP. It will also be easier for you to have your lighter work on the second 2 days, which are going to be back to back. You'll see that I usually start off the day with legs, and then my big compound movements for the upper body, and then my isolation work at the end. I think this is the best way for beginners to start to maximize the productivity of the workout overall. You'll see that on back days, I like to have 1 horizontal and 1 vertical pull. I like spreading them out this way so that you get maximum productivity on each exercise. You'll also see that I've rigged this up so that you're training your side delts on every workout 4 times a week. I find that the side delts do well with higher frequencies and higher volumes. So this is just a good way to fit in more effective volume. Now, looking at our weekly set volumes, you'll see that this is a pretty low volume program. So it's going to be well suited for a beginner or early intermediate. Remember that you're going to have to modify this program over time for optimal progress, and you'll probably want to add in sets for various muscle groups at some point. That being said, this program is a nice framework for you to add in sets. All right, let's talk a little bit about implementation. Now, I set this program up for 4 days per week, and my preferred setup of the days would be push, push, and pull. You'll see that I've ordered the days so push comes before pull. I've done this because on your push days, your squat type movements are less likely to affect your hip hinge movements the day after. However, if you switched it around on your first day where you have your glute and hamstring training, if you have soreness in those muscles going into your squat day, you're definitely going to have a tougher time on squats. This especially becomes an issue later in the week when these 2 days are back to back. Now, a lot of people will ask about training every other day, that is 1 day on, 1 day off, and this can work. As you know, in general, I recommend twice per week frequency for all muscle groups. An 8-day cycle wouldn't be my favorite option, but if you really want to train 1 day on, 1 day off, then this split is well suited for it. The other thing is, for this split, you really want to have your days spread out as much as possible throughout the week, mainly because we have leg training on every single workout. So in this situation, I wouldn't recommend having your push and pull days back to back both times throughout the week. So try and spread out your rest days as much as possible. Okay, so now that we've gone through the setup of the split, let's talk about the pros and cons. One advantage of the push-pull split, and something that makes it unique, is that it splits up your leg training. Some people find it really tough having all of their leg volume in one day because it makes your leg days far more difficult than your other days. Splitting up your leg training across the week can make it a bit more manageable from a mental standpoint. Next, the push-pull split fits well into 4 times per week, which gives you a built-in twice per week frequency. I recommend training each muscle group at least twice per week because it will accommodate more volume as you scale up and make sure that you're maximally productive for every set. Also, you'll get more practice in stimulating each muscle group and help you develop technique and mind-muscle connection over time. Last pro of the push-pull split is that it evens out your training stress. And this largely comes from the fact that you're basically training in a modified full body fashion. Since you're splitting up your upper and lower body training across all days, you're going to have more even training demand. And you're not going to have a single day that's way harder or way easier than your other days. Okay, let's move on to talk about the cons of the push-pull split. First of all, you've got back-to-back legs later in the week. If you're someone who gets really sore after workouts, it might not be the best having really sore quads going into your pull days, since it might affect your productivity on heavy hip hinge movements like deadlift patterns. You can get around this though by being careful with your intensity as well as your movement selection, which we'll talk about in the recommendations. Next, for this split, it's not that easy to add in another day. With the upper-lower split, if you have a weak upper body, you can just add in another upper body day. With this, it's not as easy. Next, you've got more push than pull muscles, so your push days may end up being a little bit longer. You can get around this though by moving around some of your smaller muscle groups, like abs and calves. Splitting up your side delt work across all days like what I did is also a great idea. Lastly, your hip hinge movements on pull day may affect your back training. This won't be much of an issue with the split that I've laid out, since your volumes are quite low. But as you progress and add more volume, you may find that you're really fatigued after your heavy hip hinge movements like deadlifts. And this might affect your back training later on, since hip hinges involve quite a bit of the back musculature. If your back is already fatigued from deadlifts going into your pulling movements, you may not be able to perform as much volume and thus not get as good a hypertrophy stimulus. All right, now let's give you some recommendations for modifications you might make to this split as you're following it. First of all, I'd recommend that you choose more pure squat versus hip hinge movements for back-to-back days. So when you have 2 days in a row later in the week, be careful about how you choose your leg movements. Specifically on pull days, you'll want to have more of a pure hip hinge, which means choose movements where you're not using your quads as much. For example, deadlifts, especially sumo deadlifts, do use your quads quite a bit. So I'd put them on the first pull day and put something like RDLs where you don't bend so much at the knees on the second pull day. Next recommendation is to try adding more volume when you stall. I set this program up as a low volume program, which is going to be well suited for beginners or early intermediates. You will probably need more volume as you become more advanced, so try adding in sets as needed. This program, however, will be a good scaffold for you to just add in sets. Lastly, I'd recommend that you try moving around and splitting up smaller muscle groups to even out the training stress. For example, your biceps, side delts, calves, and abs are going to do fairly well if you move them around on different days or even split up the volume over multiple days. You'll see that I split up the side delt volume across all days, which can be nice because side delts recover quickly and may benefit from being trained more frequently. I didn't mention this in the cons, but one disadvantage you'll find with this split as you become more advanced is that on pull days, your biceps are going to be trained when they're already fatigued after being trained by back movements. The solution for this, which works nicely in this split, is that you'll take your bicep training and move it over to push day and move some other small muscle group onto pull day instead. That way you'll train your biceps when they're fresh and give your biceps somewhat of a 4 times per week frequency, since you do stimulate them on your back days as well. Now, if you want to download the program, I will be sharing the Excel file with the full program as I've laid out in my Facebook group. So go join the group and you'll be able to download it for free. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like the video and leave me a comment below. I'm really good about answering every single one of my comments, so you'll definitely hear back from me. In particular, what program do you want me to see put out next? Let me know. If you want to learn more about the specific training variables like volume, frequency, and rep ranges, check out my playlist where I go through each of the variables in depth so you can learn how to build your own custom program. If you've been getting value from my channel, make sure you share the channel with your fitness friends so they can benefit from it too. See you next time.